All right, let's talk about empathy and what it has to do with leadership, especially in a global context. Empathy, especially in global context, is very important, and I hope to make sure that that is clear by the end of this. So first of all, you need to understand there are three types of pathy. So first of all, the word pathy comes from the Greek word pathos, which means suffering or feeling. So the three types of this suffering or feeling would be apathy, which basically means without feeling or I don't care. Then there's sympathy, and the prefix sim comes from the Greek meaning together, so it really means feeling the same pain or feeling with someone else. And then finally is this word empathy, and there's actually no root for the word empathy. It's a psychological word that has been developed to help us understand what we need in order to work together in a social context. And it basically means to imagine what another person is feeling. So let's look at it this way, these three types of pathy. So if you're walking next to this river and you see somebody fall in, somebody who is apathetic would say, I don't care that you fell in. Somebody who is sympathetic would either know exactly what it's like because they've fallen into the river before, or they would throw themselves into the river in order to experience the same feeling that you're feeling. And then a person with empathy would then imagine what it was like to be in that river. And then if that person imagines what it's like, they're going to feel, in theory, what it's like to be in that river. And a good person would then act on that. They would say, oh, it would be awful for me, and I would hope that somebody would throw me a rope. So they would go get a rope and throw it to them. So these three types of empathy, when we boil it down, first of all, it's cognitive. Cognitive empathy is knowing what another person is feeling and what they might be thinking. It's about taking someone else's perspective. Then there's emotional empathy, and that is feeling what another person is feeling as if those emotions were contagious. And if you ever get down deeper into it, we actually do know from science that emotions are actually very contagious. And then finally, it's about compassionate empathy. It's that I saw that person in the river, and if I was stuck in the river, I would want somebody to help me, so I'm going to help them. Now, what empathy, where this comes from, is this idea that you can read in the book Mirroring People. And if you've taken my emotional intelligence class, you've probably had a little bit of experience with this. But mirror neurons basically are these things that we discovered by accident that when I feel something and express it, then someone else can see that on me and they will actually feel a little bit of that same emotion. For instance, if you see someone else smile, your body actually fires some of the same neurons as if you were smiling. So when you see someone else smile, you'll begin to smile too. Whenever you hear a joke and people around you laugh, you begin to feel a little bit of joy whether you like the joke or not, because you still feel that everybody else around you is feeling a little bit happy. And so these mirror neurons basically are wired within us to help us feel what someone else is feeling. It's when we watch slapstick comedy or America's Funniest Videos and we see somebody else get kicked in the groin, almost all of us kind of cringe a little bit because we imagine what that might feel like. So that's a little bit of an example of a mirror neuron. In this module, I've got a link to Jeremy Rifkin's Empathic Civilization video. It's a TED Talk. You can read his whole book, which is a very long, expansive book, and it's brilliant. But he crams it into basically a 10-minute video that I want you to watch. And so I just want to pull out a couple of the key points. More of will be on the quiz than what I'm about to talk to you about. But this is the really brief version of some key issues that will help us understand this. So first of all, Jeremy Rifkin, and this isn't in the TED Talk, but it's in his book, he talks about the idea of thermodynamics. And the first law of thermodynamics is about entropy. Entropy is this idea that almost all systems are completely unable to sustain themselves. If somebody was able to create something that was able to sustain itself, it would be a perpetual motion invention, and that would just change the entire world. But nothing is in perpetual motion. Energy runs out, and so we always, systems eventually end. And so he really boils down to this idea that energy, that all systems, all organizations, everything from every organism to every factory depend on some kind of energy to keep them going. For instance, our bodies need calories in order to stay in motion or to stay alive. Cars need fuel. Factories need supplies. Factories need electricity or need heat, whatever it is, to keep those things going. But in the end, our primal need is to survive. And so we need energy to survive. So we go deeper into this problem of survival. Survival means that we need to be self-centered in order to survive. When there's not enough out there, right? We must kind of rally up our wagons and or circle the wagons and take care of ourselves because we have to survive, and we need energy to do that. And so, in order to consume energy, you might be taking energy that I need, and so in essence, you're a threat to me whenever there's a scarcity of energy. So the other the other people, the other nations, or whoever it might be, other organizations, other than me, you're a threat. My desire to see me survive is greater than my desire to see you survive when resources are scarce. So that's kind of the problem that Jeremy Rifkin establishes. But there's a confusion with this problem. And this confusion is that we know that we survive better in groups than by ourselves. So we're kind of stuck between two worlds here. If you're a fan of the show The Walking Dead, you understand this, right? There's very little resources to maintain people's lives in the Walking Dead world, and so it's easy for people to be very self-centered because they're just trying to survive, and laws go out. No common sense is not important anymore because it's about me trying to survive. But at the same time, if you've watched The Walking Dead, you know that there's no way that you can survive by yourself. And so part of the idea is that we do need to survive better in groups. So maybe what we're really trying to figure out is what group is big enough to help me survive, but small enough to help me use the right resources without overusing resources. So that's really where the confusion is. How big is too big and how small is too small? So what's just that Goldilocks kind of just right fit? So Jeremy Rifkin talks more about the solution, and it's really in empathy. He says that we're soft-wired for it, that we're soft-wired for things like sociability, attachment, affection, and companionship. And that this need that we have, this wiring that we have to be empathic, means that our first drive, our first motivator, is really the motivation or the drive to belong to something. So he goes deeper into the solution, and the solution is that empathy drives feelings of solidarity. And that what Rifkin really asks, is it possible for us to extend our empathy to the entire human race? And not just to the entire human race, but to our whole biosphere. Because we need energy to survive. We need coal to survive. And so sooner or later that coal will run out. And what will be the next thing? We're going to need the sun to survive because that's a renewable source of energy. How do we use that? How do we take care of our entire biosphere? And how do we take care of other people? And that's really what Rifkin is trying to ask, is how do we extend this wiring that we humans have to make sure that everybody is involved in that. And he ponders that if we cannot figure out how to extend our empathy, extend our solidarity to the rest of the human race, then maybe our planet won't survive in the end, right? Because sooner or later we were going to run out of resources, not in our lifetime, but many lifetimes from now. So he's really thinking long term here. But the solution is that empathy used to be extended just to our blood ties, just to those people who were closest to us back in our primeval days. But through the media, through the Gutenberg printing press, all the way through social media, we've been able to extend our empathy from our blood ties to other people. And now we realize that the rest of the world is kind of like me in a sense. And he talks about, the earthquake in Haiti that happened a few years ago, or anytime we see just a massive tragedy on the face of the earth, when we see pictures of other people suffering, we feel for them, and most of us spring to action. So really, this class is about learning how to expand our empathy. How can we lead other people if we don't understand them? And if we don't have empathy, then leadership is just some form of management. And it becomes about asking, how do we force other people to follow what we're trying to do? And we try to do this through, some kind of employment contracts or fear of firing. We tell people we will pay you to do this in order to get them to do it. But what we know is that just telling somebody we're going to give you money to do this doesn't mean we're going to get good results. It means they're just going to do bare minimum. So really, without empathy, without trying to help people meet them where they are and understand who they are to lead them, really leadership just becomes about getting followers to comply to my orders, not really to commit to the idea that I'm trying to get them to do. So empathy is really that thing that takes this thing management and makes it into leadership. I look back to a year ago. I remember whenever Ferguson, Missouri was happening, and just hearing the way that people talked. It was funny to me that some people didn't even know Ferguson was happening. I remember on my Facebook, my wall was completely covered with the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. But yet, here was this huge tragedy and huge situation that was happening in Ferguson, Missouri. But part of the world didn't even know what was going on for a few days and maybe even longer than a week. But yet it was this massive thing that was happening in the United States. And what Ferguson taught us is Facebook actually got involved and realized that there were certain people that were paying more attention to certain things because of their friends. And so what we've learned is that Facebook actually influences the kind of news that we hear, because certain people will pay attention to certain kinds of news and post that on their wall. And so really your Facebook friendships really determine what kind of news you get or what kind of understanding you have of the rest of the world. Think about it this way. If you live in the Cincinnati region, you know that there are just neighborhoods that are all white neighborhoods or all black neighborhoods, that we're not a really mixed group of people. And so whenever you live around a certain group of people, you don't really have any kind of experience with them. Your experience with these other people is what the media tells you it is. It's not about, I know these people because I live with them. It's, I know these people because I've learned little nuggets of truth about them, or little things that are just kind of stereotypical kind of information. So what we need to start thinking about is, how do we understand empathy in terms of the global context? How do we understand empathy in a cultural context? Because leading in a global context is even more difficult, because the divide between cultures is even greater. So I want to talk about stereotypes for a second. What stereotypes do we have of other countries? And then think about what stereotypes they might have about us as Americans. And the truth about stereotypes is that they're based on a little bit of truth, mixed with the whole idea that we don't really know who people are because of a lack of information or experience about them. And if I don't know these people intimately, then I just have little nuggets of information about them. So in my travels, I've asked people what they think about America, and here are some of the funniest things I've heard about Americans. First of all, we're very promiscuous. That's a thing I hear pretty frequently. Secondly, people think that we're pretty self-centered. We're fat, which, I am, and I make sure that stereotype is true. People also think we're violent. One of the things I've asked people about when they come to travel the United States, what do they think or what are they afraid of? Most people are really afraid of coming here and experiencing violence, which is actually quite hilarious, because when we travel to other places and I take students, one of the things I hear is that we're very afraid of violence when we go to other places. I recently took a study abroad trip to Mexico City, and technically speaking, we were safer in Mexico City than we were here in Cincinnati. But yet most of our students were deathly afraid to go to Mexico City because of the violence. And yet the Mexican students, when they come to visit us, they're actually afraid, and they have reason to be afraid, because you're more likely to experience a violent act in Cincinnati than you would in Mexico City, according to statistics. This one's kind of funny. People think that we only party with Solo cups. And then we really like ball caps. When I travel, I really don't see other countries wearing ball caps, but that's something that we do pretty well here in America. We also love khakis. It's just something that we like, our cargo shorts and our cargo pants, and they're not really as popular anywhere else in the world, but they are here for some reason. And then finally, we all have this idea that we're cowboys. It's something that I think people think that there's horses everywhere. One of students that I had previously, I asked what was something that she really wanted to do whenever she was here, and she said she really wanted to ride a horse because she thought most of us had horses and rode our horses around a lot. So that was kind of funny. Well, I hope this has been interesting and informational, and I hope it helps whenever you come to take the quiz. Thanks.